Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm calling this to order now. My name is Sharice Hersey, and it is approximately 7:07. City Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Council members Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller. Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, our first thing on the agenda is to approve, we will be, now that we've opened the meeting, we will be calling a closed session.
No, that's the wrong.
No, which one am I doing?
You're doing this agenda.
That's what I thought.
This is afterwards.
Okay, all right, so, not closed session, okay. You guys gonna be going around in circles. Approval of minutes for the previous meeting, June 24th, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded
Okay,
by Dennis.
okay, so it was moved by Mary Alice Wu and seconded by Dennis Roberts. Are there any corrections or discussion regarding the minutes? No? Okay, seeing that there are no additions or corrections, then I move forward to be approved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. I'm getting this, you guys. Next on the agenda, any additions to the agenda? Any additions at all to the agenda? Okay, seeing no additions. Moving on to public input, and I have here several. If anyone has any public input cards, will you please bring them forward? And I will start with, my statement. Oh, okay. Mayor Marlin would like to make a statement first, and then I'll move on to the other.
Good evening, everybody. I know a number of you, or probably most of you, are here related to the special events ordinance and the Independent Media Center, so I wanted to address that. I apologize for not being here last week. I was attending the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting, as well as a climate mayors meeting. I'm also kind of jet lagged, so I'm going to ask Sharice, if I start to go off the rails, just push me back on track because I'm still recovering.
Okay.
Anyway, I have some comments related to the situation. First of all, I want to state the most important things first. The city is committed to work through the current issues with the Independent Media Center in collaboration with City Council, staff, and the community to resolve things in a way that works for all involved. I had a 45-minute conversation with Danielle Chenoweth this afternoon representing the IMC. I asked her to join me in resetting this effort as of today so we can move forward together. We share the same goals of having safe spaces for vibrant and inclusive community arts and cultural activities in Urbana, and we'll work together to ensure that. So tonight we're going to listen to community input, to information from staff, and we'll have discussion by City Council. On Wednesday, I'll meet with IMC Board President Karen Medina and Treasurer Danielle Chenoweth to identify specific concerns and areas that we need to address. We'll take all of this into account to propose a way forward. I expect the path will have, I don't exactly know what this is going to look like yet, but we will formulate that as we work through things. I expect this path is going to have at least a couple of components. One will focus on short-term solutions to the issues raised under the current ordinance, and the other will consider longer-term changes to the ordinance, fee structure, that sort of thing, with the ultimate goal of having a policy that helps all of our local venues thrive, and one that's flexible enough to adapt to diverse types of venues that are cropping up in Urbana, because that's, frankly, is what makes our community interesting and exciting to be in. The special events ordinance was never intended to micromanage events at the IMC, cause undue burdens or stress, or financially threaten its existence. There have been some unintended consequences that have impacted both the city and the IMC. We recognize them. We're going to work to fix them. Sometimes you don't get things right on the first time around, but what's important is what you do to address them the second time around. I also want to emphasize a couple of points. First, the city has had a very positive and collaborative relationship with the Independent Media Center since its formation in, I think it was 2001. Is that correct? Okay, in 2000. So this is reflected by the significant public investments in the organization over the past 19 years. For example, the city has provided nearly $25,000 in redevelopment incentives to the IMC. Entrepreneurs located at IMC have received about $25,000 in business opening grants. The city has awarded 9 grants totaling nearly $16,000 directly to the IMC through our public arts program. Several years ago, the city and IMC collaborated to win a $50,000 grant from the National Endowments for the Arts that focused on inclusion of youth and underrepresented communities in the arts. From that collaboration has come Open Scene, Open Mic, which is an ongoing program that fills a critical need in our community. It gives voice to people who often have not been heard in the past. And finally, the general public is investing in the IMC. The state of Illinois allocated $75,000 in the recently passed capital bill to the IMC. This should help them make some critical facility improvements. The second point is that the current situation is not the result of an arbitrary decision. The 2017 revisions to the Special Events Ordinance stem from a number of serious public safety incidents related to events that happened both at either the IMC and Lincoln Square back in 2016 and 2017, and some before that. These are 2 separate venues. They just happen to be located next to each other in downtown. But there were enough problems involving police calls for service back then that it was decided to amend our special events ordinance to include provisions to address event venues in the situations we were facing. This was done in order to be proactive rather than reactive. We wanted to help prevent the kinds of problems we were seeing rather than, respond with police response. The city wished to work with venues to help them understand basic components of a security plan, things like occupancy limits, access to buildings, that sort of thing, so they could operate safely and hopefully minimize incidents that required police response. City staff and police have since then worked closely with the IMC. But until recently, the revisions to the ordinance that are being put to the test right now really hadn't been put to the test, and obviously we've found them wanting. So we need to fix them. I ask the community tonight to give us the space to come up with a solution, and we will work toward a solution. So I'm going to close with this observation. In the past few days, a number of people have asked me, what exactly is the IMC? Because not everybody is familiar with the place or the organization. So when I tried to explain it to folks and all that it does, it really reinforced in my mind what a unique and special role the organization and the place plays in the community. And to me, it called to mind the concept of the third place. I don't know if you've read, some of you probably have seen The Great Good Places by Ray Oldenburg. Carol Mitten actually gave me this book as we were brainstorming about the Lincoln Square site and what we wanted to see in the future. But anyway, Oldenburg talks about the concept of third place. There's home, there's work, and then there's the third place. And what sets great communities apart is the presence of these third places in the community. And he describes these places as levelers, where folks from all walks of life and different perspectives can meet. And in some cities, it might be a public square, it might be a favorite tavern, it might be, just a meeting place. But they all share common characteristics of being places where people are, quote, accepted, embraced, enjoined, and enjoyed, end quote, and where they feel, quote, at home, freedom to be, and are regenerated and restored, end quote. So when people are going to ask me what the IMC is, I'm going to say it's one of the special third places in Urbana for those reasons. So again, I ask you to give us the time and space to work through this issue, and we will resolve it. Thank you.
Are there any more public input cards that need to come forward before we move on with public input?
Plenty of state entitled to 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay. And after that, it's 3 minutes.
Well, anyone wants to speak before we get started, or
Okay. Well, I have several cards here tonight. So let me preface this by saying, Karen Medina wants to, as far as speaking, making official statement. After that, everyone else will be held to 3 minutes because we have so many. Not yet. Let me just do this real quick. But I do have several input cards of people who wish to either support and not speak. Geraldine Theobald is in support, and this place is important for meetings, etc. Since no other venue that I am aware of has the space and accommodations. So Geraldine wishes to show her support. Some people did not mark whether or not they wanted to address the members or not, so I'll get to you later. Sarah Scott chooses not to speak, but she is in support of the IMC as a thriving arts and culture center in the hub of Urbana. Very much hope the city will not overburden the IMC with unnecessary regulation that hinders it. Adam Nichols is in support, but and he wishes not to speak regarding section 52. Bobby Trist is also in support of the IMC. He does not wish to say anything, I don't think. Huh? Well, you didn't mark it, I'm sorry, so. Didn't mark one way or the other. But I'll put it over here in the other pile. Brenda Larcombe? Okay. In support of IMC's suggestion that events after 9 p.m. with amplified music be subject to permits, and others that end earlier are more intimate, focused events and don't need a special event permit. That is her support, in her support of that. This is from, trying to read, Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, Bishop Underwood, regarding the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer concerns. We are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Okay. Eldris Melinda Carr, continued concerns about Dr. Ellis subdivision issues, equity, and historic impact. Thank you. And let's see, Russ Ribicki, who does not wish to address the members. I encourage the city to find a workable solution with the IMC. Nancy Dietrich of the IMC, I hope a solution can be reached that does not involve overregulation of events at the IMC. Thank you. Okay, those are the people who did not wish to. I think there's a couple here. So let me start with, okay, hold on. That's at the time of the agenda, so I'll start with, Karen, did you want to address now? Yes. Okay.
My name is Karen Medina. I live in Champaign, but I am the president of the board of directors at the Urbana Champaign Independent Media Center. That's why I write things down. I just want to thank everyone who's here in support of the IMC. We have standing room only here, and it's beautiful to see. We are well loved. This is the UCIMC's statement to the Council on July 8th, 2019. We wish to give our thanks to the Urbana City Council and Mayor for your attention to and concern for the IMC, our beloved nonprofit arts center in downtown. After 19 years of strong collaboration with the City of Urbana, we were shocked and dismayed by actions by the city administration that have been legalistic, overly broad, and show a lack of understanding of our mission and programs. Let me be clear that if things continue as they are now, the IMC could be forced to close our doors. As we stand today, the IMC must submit an application for a special event permit for any non-reoccurring event that lasts past 8 p.m. anywhere in our center. That includes poetry events, theater pieces, movies, and one-time bike project, books to prisoners, and makerspace events. The application for this permit requires a $100 non-refundable fee. This fee is up from $25 just a few months ago. And as of July 1st, the city no longer exempts nonprofit organizations from paying this fee. By the letter of the law, applications must be submitted 45 business days in advance or potentially be slapped with a fine. Nobody except weddings and corporate events are planned 45 business days in advance. Although the city staff have been gracious in not enforcing this deadline, we are concerned that since we have been sliced by the letter of the law recently, it feels hard to trust that the city will always be lenient. Last week, we had to gather donations for $300 for applications for 3 upcoming events that will bring in less than $100 each as revenue for the IMC. The city's making more money off of it than we are. Between the June 3rd letter and the June 18th meeting with the city, we had to cancel what would have been totally peaceful events and write numerous refund checks. Potential events are leaving for other places, including Champaign, where they don't have to pay the city $100 in processing fees for a permit that does not apply to their event. As a result of all this, downtown Urbana is losing valuable foot traffic and amazing arts opportunities. We regret that this issue has become escalated. The IMC only went public with our concerns after 3 months of concerted attempts to work with the city of Urbana on a solution. During those 3 months, the Urbana Police Department, sat down with us to discuss solutions. But the only communication we received from the city of Urbana's executive department were threatening or final letters. First, to put us on probation for 12 months, then to fine us $1,500, then to make an offer that they followed with a rejection of our counter offer when the city administration sent us an email saying that if we did not sign their agreement, they would take us to court. IMC members asked us, the IMC Executive Committee, to go public. We feel this lack of collaborative approach is at the heart of the issue we face. Every intervention and good faith efforts could have avoided where we are now, and that is primarily what we are asking for now. Last week, one of our board members made contact with Eric Jacobson, and this afternoon we made contact with the mayor, who was very responsive to us and our concerns, and we appreciate her support. We want to collaborate to build a beloved, inclusive, diverse community with the city of Urbana and not in opposition. The facts. We appreciate that the city administration shared the same memo with our board as it did with the council, as that shows goodwill and transparency. Thank you. We understand that when situations become escalated, the parties involved may not be working from the same understanding of the facts.
Karen.
Could you hold just a moment?
Sure.
I'd like to move that Karen be granted up to 10 minutes total for her testimony.
I accept that too. I second that.
It's fine with me.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Continue, sorry.
Thank you very much. We would like to start by responding to the statements by the city administration, so we are working from the same page. The city administrator Mitten's memo stated that it was not the intention of the city to regulate all of the public events at the IMC. Certainly that is reasonable, as we have 1,000 public events per year. But the letter dated June 3rd from the city administration clearly states all future public or special events conducted on the IMC property during the next 12-month period would require the IMC or the sponsor to apply for and obtain a special event permit from the city. This was different from our previous understanding of the March 22nd letter, our conversations with Sergeant Lotion, and our experience with the May Immersion Festival at the IMC. This new interpretation was confirmed in a conversation with the police department, which had to check with the city administration before we were given clearance for events like a Sunday afternoon Guitar Center's student recital and the Girls Rock Summer Camp. When faced, I have a picture of a thank you card from this, the Girls Rock, by the way. It's really cute in the picture. When faced with the threat of a whopping fine of $750 per event as a venue that hosts 5 to 10 events per week, we have no option but to follow the exact language of the city's letter or face fines that would destroy us. The memo states a meeting was held with Lieutenant Sanders on June 6th, and the IMC proposed that it would apply for special event permits for events that were expected to last beyond 8 p.m. In that meeting, we drew a huge circle representing all the events that the IMC, and we drew a tiny circle inside of it to indicate that the subset of events that the city had concerns about. And we asked, what would help us focus on this subset? We specifically asked if we could brainstorm ideas without making commitments, as we needed to look at data and talk with our board before agreeing to anything. The idea of an 8 p.m. option was casually floated by one of us as part of this exploratory discussion, and before we had a chance to look at any data or evaluate the impact of events. After the meeting with Lieutenant Sanders, we expected a follow-up meeting with the city's executive department. Instead, to our surprise, we received a letter offering that we could avoid the $1,500 fine if we agreed to obtain a special event permit for all public events extending past 8 p.m. Evaluating the impact of the 8 p.m. line, we discovered that if we agreed to this offer, the IMC would need to apply for 75 permits per year, 75 times $100. One should note that the city council meetings often go past 8 p.m. without violence or drinking, although I'm sure some of you want to drink by the end. Accepting the 8 p.m. suggestion would also destroy us. The city administration insists that there is no malice towards the IMC, but we point to one example that makes us feel targeted for punishment. This past May 2019, the City Council voted on a new schedule of fees. We note that the change does not include the typically explanatory memo that normally accompanies even small changes. This new schedule quietly increases the application for a special event permit by 400% overnight, from $25 to $100, and removes the long-standing waiver for nonprofit organizations. Were you made aware of this drastic change and its impact before voting? This change was made 2 months after the city administration's first threatening letter to us demanding these permits. Since we appeared before you last week, we have had to scrape together private donations to pay $300 in application fees for 3 events, where the total income for the IMC for these events will be much less than $300. This is an example of a change that appears to be specifically targeting the IMC so as to regulate us out of existence. police calls for service. The IMC board thanks City Administrator Minton for providing the list of Urbana police visits to the IMC. We had requested this over a month ago so that we could review the history of any incidents and work on correcting. We were told that we needed to FOIA for it, Freedom of Information Act. So last Friday is the first we have seen this list. It is essential that the council and the public understand that the IMC is a safe location. Of the 1,000 plus public events we host each year, it is very rare that we need police intervention, and usually for occasional disorderly conduct or petty theft. Those instances of real concern are what we want to focus on. Since March, we have greatly enhanced security with clear security plans, regular checks by board members, and we continue to work on issues of safety and venue management. Looking at the list that City Administrator Minton labeled as calls for service, this is vital information which is easily misinterpreted. For instance, items listed as follow-up, foot patrol, bar closing, and traffic stop would not be initiated by a call for help. Other visits labeled as found a property would also not be related to the IMC as a venue. So this list is more likely a list of times the police had official business at or near the IMC. Looking at 2019, for instance, please note that March 22nd and June 3rd are listed as calls when they are simply times when an officer was sent to hand deliver letters from the city, the same ones that are in your packet from the city administration. Of the 13 listed, there are only for 2019, there are only 4 items of significance in 2019. The first 3 were all before 8 p.m. and were not associated with any IMC-related event. Therefore, these calls would not be prevented by the proposed rule. March 10th marked as juvenile at 6 p.m., March 13th shortly after 12 noon where someone was removed, and April 3rd at 6:30 p.m. are listed as fight. We believe all of these are related to a group of teens who were banned from the Urbana Free Library and Lincoln Square Mall in March, who then came to hang out, keep dry, and get warm in the post office lobby and hallways of the IMC. In repeatedly asking the teens to behave, we spoke with them and discovered they are struggling with significant home issues. They need support that the city and the IMC should collaborate on providing. But these significant calls have nothing to do with the IMC events or programs. Moving on down that list, we note that May 12th, an event for which we were fined $750, doesn't even appear on this list. May 11th is listed as disorderly conduct during an event fully overseen by the IMC with 2 board members present, along with an overly large security team for a lightly attended and peaceful event. Lieutenant Sanders mentioned this call for service during one of our meetings with him, and we discovered it was a call about a verbal threat that was unsubstantiated when the police walked over to investigate. We ask that the City Council and anyone reading this list provided by City Administrator Minton to read the list carefully and not be misled by the title given to the list. It is a list of police visits to the IMC on official business. It is not a list of calls, nor is it a list related to public events at the IMC. Moving forward, we now get to what we propose as a way forward. First and foremost, please remove IMC from the 12-month probation. 2018 had little incident. 2019, the incidents are not related to the venue or programming. We argue that the March 15th event, where alcohol was peacefully consumed, does not fit the criteria in Section 14-53C1 of an event where the city resources were deployed to address a threat to human life health, or safety or property, as the activities at the IMC were similar to that of any downtown venue at that same hour. Second, please immediately revise the fee schedule to add back a waiver for special events by nonprofit organizations. This affects sister institutions like Community Center for the Arts, Urbana Neighborhood Connections, and others, and will have a chilling effect on hosting events in Urbana. Third, fix the special use permit ordinance. There are numerous problems with it as amended in 2017, including the most concerning aspect of this ordinance is that it punishes businesses and venues who call for police service. One downtown business owner, upon reading about this conflict between us and the city and the ordinance, shared that it makes him afraid to call the police lest what happened to the IMC happen to him. It takes policies regarding large-scale festivals and events with alcohol and street closures and applies them to tiny, single, indoor events on private property. 45 business day deadline for applications, the $100 fee, etc. It appears to violate the right to free speech and the right to peaceably assemble. It creates a huge drain in staff time for the venue and the city to legislate a large number of non-problematic events. Number 4, collaborate with us. We sincerely want to work with the city on ensuring our venue is safe and accessible to all. The city can offer us ideas for how to increase security, and we can help the city understand what it takes for vulnerable populations to feel welcome and safe, which is an area of expertise for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Medina, for that. Barry Israelowitz, he's chosen not to address, but he is in support for the IMC ability to hold late-night events in order for a robust community serving organizations that hold regularly scheduled events to come into being. They must first hold intermittent, occasional, special events. So thank you, Barry. And I believe Ann Quackenbush, who chooses also, and she says an opposition, but I'm not sure what that means. Requiring $100, huh? Oh, okay. So you are in support of the IMC requirement for, okay. But requiring $100 special permit 45 days in advance of events is prohibitive to the health of the IMC. Please dump this. Oh, hold on. Even if only for those after 9 p.m., please dump this requirement. Thank you, Ann. And then there is, that's going to be at the time of the agenda. Okay. Moving forward, we have several people that wish to come to speak before the council. 3 minutes. Bobby Trist. And then I'll put the rest of them in alphabetical order.
My name is Bobby Trist, and I'm a resident of Urbana, Champaign, and I've lived in Champaign, Urbana 42 years. I think the IMC is a really precious resource, and this would be killing the goose that laid the golden egg. It is a vital part of the fabric of our community, and I see the community as Champaign, Urbana, Savoy, Thomasboro, etc. We're more than one city, but we're one community. But you hold the strings because the IMC is located in Urbana. when my youngest son, who's now 40, moved back to town in 2001, he'd been living with his father for a couple of years, he got involved with the IMC when it was very young. And the first thing he did was a radio broadcast that was a report on urban farming. And I think this was really formative. He would have been 22 at the time. And we've all heard about the studies that their brains don't fully develop until the mid-20s. And so I think this was really a formative experience for him in being involved with the IMC. So the IMC sponsors so many things. It has the bike project, it has books to prisoners, it has makerspace, a lot of community meetings go on there. I've been involved with the what was once called No More Jails and then became Build Programs Not Jails. And most of our meetings were held at the IMC. Now the No Cash Bail Coalition is meeting there. This is a valuable space, and please don't kill it. Thank you.
Annie Adams.
Hello, I'm Annie Adams and I live in Urbana. What makes a city great? Culture. How do we define culture? Through our cultural assets. Cultural assets can be places where interesting and new things happen that define and inspire the people that live there, such as wine tastings and music at Stage 5 in the Krannert Arts Center, walking and listening to the cicadas sing in Busey Woods, or trying out food truck and beer offerings at Riggs. Cultural assets can be people who have cultivated connections and expertise that they wish to share with the community. This can be expressed through dance therapy meetups, Santa Rampage bike rides, interesting front yard gardens, pop-up musical events on Common Ground's front porch. By combining the assets of place and people, we create culture which is unique to our city in this place and time. In 2016, Kristen Walters and I started Imbibe Urbana and Urbana First Fridays. We were energized by what we felt were untapped cultural assets that needed a voice. While I am no longer involved in the project, I can say unequivocally the IMC was an invaluable partner in our endeavor. The volunteers at IMC created yoga classes, art openings, DJ, live music, and dancing on the street in front of their building and inside the building, as well as offering tours of the building, which includes makerspace, bike project, so on and so forth. We, nor they, made a profit from any of this activity, unlike other downtown businesses who often brought in upwards of $5,000 during Urbana First Friday events. This is all to say that none of this would have happened if we were asked to have 45 days notice, pay $100 per event, and have a security plan. I currently work for the University of Illinois at the Graduate College. One of the ways to recruit the best graduate students to Illinois is to let them know about the cities they will be moving to for 2 years, 10 years, hopefully a lifetime. Our Instagram feed has photos from the IMC showing world-class musicians playing with graduate students. Often these musical events have 8 to 15 people, which have been organized by volunteers in less than 10 days and happen from 8 to 10 p.m., which is great for someone like me who rises at 6 a.m. I am unsure about the circumstances surrounding the beer on premise scandal, but since people over 21 work in the building, I am guessing the refrigerators have alcohol in them. Maybe this can all be resolved with a giant sign that says no alcohol beyond this point for events unless catered. My basic plea is please do not make it difficult to create light, quick, cheap happenings. These 3 elements, light, quick, cheap, are essential for the creation of unique city culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Cope Cumston?
I'm Cope Cumston. I live in Urbana. I spent 6 years sitting there with the Human Relations Commission. I spent 6 years on the Urbana School Board, and I'm a founding funder of the IMC since 2000. I want to thank Mayor Marlin for your statement. That was very reassuring, but I'm really upset to hear the experience of the IMC with city administration. I'd like to add my voice to the concerns over excessive restrictions for programming that the City of Urbana has imposed on the Independent Media Center. I've been associated with the IMC since its founding in 2000 and was trained in the original location on Main Street in interviewing and editing recordings for radio broadcast when media was under attack at the Seattle protests of the meetings of the World Trade Organization. People from this community put their bodies on the line to protect citizens' rights to free speech and to ensure accurate reporting. The IMC is part of a critically important worldwide focus of media, political awareness, activism, and free speech. The IMC is a grassroots organization. It's unusual, it pushes the boundaries, it challenges the status quo, and yes, occasionally it may challenge the quiet demeanor of downtown Urbana. Some of us think Urbana has more to gain from this than to lose. Look closely at the deeper value of what the IMC provides and how thin the line of financial security it operates under. The IMC is a rare and fragile voice. We are all seeing freedoms and resources we've taken for granted in this country disappearing. Don't let this happen in Urbana. I urge you to lift the restrictions immediately and begin the necessary discussions to support rather than restrict an invaluable community resource. Thank you.
Dottie? Dottie?
Good evening. I'm Dottie Vura-Weiss, and I've lived in Urbana for close to 6 years now. And I am appreciative of Mayor Marlin's comments at the very beginning and of the thoughtful suggestions, report and suggestions from the board of the IMC. I see that the IMC serves as a community center, or same way as schools and churches do in terms of the programs that it puts on. They're programs that build community by allowing people to talk with those that aren't already their friends and acquaintances. And the wide range, some of you are very familiar with it, but maybe not all. I've been there to birthday parties for people from about 5 to 80. I've actually been part of a presentation on court fees and fines, which included presentations by the chair of the state committee, the State General Assembly Committee that was reviewing it, also the prosecuting attorney chief from the federal courthouse, and someone who had been impacted severely by the fees and fines that were limiting her ability to move on with her life, and now she has finally gotten her master's in social work from the university. I've not always been involved in these things, but also I know that there have been classes on African American drumming and classes of the Kathak dancing style, which is a traditional style of dancing from India that involves simultaneously having different meters, you know, a meter of 5 and a meter of 7, that they are making the rhythm with their feet as well as doing the dance that they're doing. So it's an incredible resource, and as many others have said. And I am very concerned about the regulations and their impact on this. I appreciate also the comments about how being able to create events on a quick, responsive time schedule is so important. So that I would suggest that you suspend the enforcement of these rules until a resolution can be found. And I support the recommendations of the board of the IMC that include removing the probation, going back to exempting the 501c3 organizations because they are part of our community and part of a community benefit, fixing the fee schedule if it if any part of it continues, and working on collaboration with community organizations in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, making sure that if there's something where there's an anticipation there will be a huge crowd, yes, the police need to know about it. But otherwise, I encourage them to be able to continue with their current activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dottie. I have a few more notices that, or people did not want to address the council. Lisa Powers, the topic is IMC. In support of IMC, I want to make sure that permit laws do not force IMC to become unable to serve such a wide swath of our community, including groups without funds to pay for permits. Please remove the one-year probation and change permit laws to be more accessible to the community. John McNally, who also is in support and does not wish to speak. I'm in support of the IMC, and I oppose the ruling to something special events. Okay, permits. I'm sorry, I couldn't read that. Allison Marbell, Rebel. Unnecessary. I don't like to say that people's names wrong. Unnecessary permit is required of the IMC that could potentially hinder its ability to serve as a diverse and safe community arts space / arts space. Okay, we have other people coming forward. 3 minutes, people, please. And this is one more that is not speaking? I'm not sure, because you didn't mark it. But I'll say that you're choosing not to address. In opposition, I oppose any restrictions on activities held at the IMC, a jewel in downtown Urbana. Let's not crimp the style and activities of people who may not look or think like the majority. Okay. Next, we have Belden Fields, who wishes to come forward.
Good evening. The packet that I have here is the exchange between, well, it's mainly from the city to the IMC. And I've been a resident of Urbana for 54 years. And when I read this, it didn't look like Urbana to me. Someone in the administration was quoted as saying that this is the way we do things in Urbana. That's very unfamiliar to me. We at the IMC, I should say I'm one of the original donors to the IMC. I'm a past member of the board of the IMC. I am on the editorial group that does the Public Eye, which is the newspaper of the IMC. So I'm very familiar with the organization. And we're open to young people. Particularly, we encourage young people of all backgrounds to come in. We try to offer a safe place where they can perform, learn, and innovate. Our openness means that we take risks. Our major reward for taking those risks, not money, but the gratification that comes with providing a unique space and service. And you, the city, have up to this point been encouraging of that, and you have come to us to cooperate with you on this. Yes, some unfortunate things have happened. Like someone brought alcohol into our space without a permit, and he was seen leaving the space. We try to take measures to prevent this, and we will do so in the future. But when you open up to keep youth off the streets, to repeat, there are always risks that are involved. And I hope you do not want to destroy us, because really you will be cutting your nose off to spite your face. I just want to say one other thing that's I find very disturbing, and that is calls for service to the police. It appears that organizations, or maybe even businesses, are penalized, because here we have a recounting, oh, we've had to come because you called us. We want to be free to call the police and have that viewed as a positive thing. That's the kind of cooperation we want. We cannot, if there is violence, for example, we are not deputized as agents of the state. We can't commit violence against someone who's committing violence in that body. We will need the police to do that. So this is just a completely perverse idea that you would say, okay, we've had these calls for police, those are demerits against you. And in fact, what it is trying to be responsible citizens of this city. Thank you.
Stephanie Furtado, and I'm assuming you and Mike Ingram both would like to speak at the same time? No. Oh, okay, well then Stephanie Furtado, come on up.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Furtado, and I actually am a resident of Champaign, but I'm mostly coming to you in capacity as a board member of the county board. And as a board member of the county board of District 8, I actually sit on a board that, a committee that oversees special use permits. And I understand the difficulty sometimes of the logistics of paperwork and sort of trying to balance all of the different concerns that you all have. But this situation to me just seems like it's been incredibly mishandled. The policy is a problem, but more importantly, the lack of collaboration and just, frankly, common sense in handling it seems to be the deeper problem. Mayor Marlin, I really appreciated your conversation about third space. In my work at the university, I think a lot about third space, and Sojan Lefebvre's ideas about like the dynamism of those kind of spaces and how they're essential to having a vibrant city. For me personally, the IMC has been that kind of space. I've planned events there. I brought a muralist from Chicago down there. I've been on radio shows there. I've attended book clubs there. All of them except I think one have been after 8 p.m. I want to go a little bit further than some of the things that some of the other folks have asked as remedies. I want you to revisit the policy for all not-for-profits and get rid of that. I want you to give back the $300 that they had to raise. And I want you to proactively figure out ways to collaborate. What Belden said was that this isn't the Urbana that he knows, and it's not the Urbana that I've come to know. I was a resident here for a very long time before I moved back over to Champaign. Urbana is a unique community, and one of the things that makes it a unique and special place is the IMC. The relationships I've built with people through attending events at the IMC are relationships that sustain me. They're the reason I'm involved in public office in many ways. And it's one of the core things that makes Urbana Urbana. So I really hope that you work with folks to come up with solutions. And also, and this is really important, figure out what went wrong with this situation and how situations like this can be handled better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure I'm going to mispronounce this. Patrick Dupret Guillaume.
Am I the right distance away here?
As long as I can hear you, sweetie.
My name is Patrick Dupre Guillaume, and I'm here to speak in support of the Urbana Champaign Independent Media Center. The Independent Media Center in this community is part of a network of organizations that at one point spanned the country and attempted to break the stranglehold of corporate control that has gradually subverted the independent press in this country. However, I think its role in this community goes far deeper than that. I've noticed that many of the people who've come to speak here in support of this organization have been people who've lived in this community for a very long time. I moved to Urbana about a year ago in August. And I think I speak for a lot of people who are new to this community when I say that it's not always very easy to find a niche for oneself when you lack any friends or connections. The Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center has given me a place where I can allow myself to form new relationships with people that I would otherwise never have met. I was there volunteering earlier today, and a young woman came in who was distraught over the death of her ex-fiance's cat. And even though we weren't in a position to change anything about the situation, she was able to come in and find people who were willing to lend her a sympathetic ear, including Karen Medina. I have been developing my capacities as of right now, amateur librarian and helping with the IMC zine library. And in the absence of the IMC, if these restrictive permits and if this probationary period remain in effect, the imposition that would create for the IMC would be very, very challenging for them to meet as an organization. And I strongly encourage all of you to work to defuse the tensions between the Urbana City Council and the Independent Media Center in order to permit this organization to continue doing the valuable work it does. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. GEO Local 6300.
Okay. Hello, my name is Hillary Pacheco, and I will be reading a statement in support of the IMC.
Closer to your mouth so we can hear you.
Okay,
you.
and
you pull the mic forward.
Just pull it forward. Okay.
Yeah, you can pull it forward.
I will be reading a statement in support of the IMC on behalf of the GEO. The Graduate Employees Organization at UIUC, AFT Local 6300, expresses our support for the Independent Media Center, a mostly volunteer-run non-for-profit community center in Urbana. We oppose the new city guidelines, which impose a requirement that IMC events must obtain a permit at least 45 days in advance and at a cost of $100. These new requirements are overly onerous for a volunteer-run center and will have a disproportionately negative effect on underserved working class and youth communities hoping to hold events at the IMC. GEO has hosted a number of events at the IMC in the past, from welcome back events to contract ratification votes. The IMC is a vital pillar of the community, and we hope the Urbana City Council will help, not hinder, it in its mission to provide a safe, inclusive, and accessible space for the people of Champaign-Urbana. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, because it wasn't marked, is this not wish to address the members, but wish to know your position? I'm sorry, no, not you. Jeannie Colvert? Yes. Did you want to speak or no? No, I want you to read. Okay. Where can our high school students go do their walk out to teach in? I was privileged to, huh? About gun violence. Okay. I was privileged to serve as a volunteer for what was a very moving experience for all parents, students, teachers, and community. Where? The IMC. Mike Ingram, would you like to step forward, please? Mike Ingram? I'm not speaking loud enough. I find that hard to believe.
It's full room.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Ingram, Champaign resident, member of the Champaign County Board, and a longtime user of the IMC. I managed to put all my thoughts down in one space this time, so let me just read this really quickly. As I mentioned before, last week during public comment, I think that spaces are important to do whatever it is that people find lacking elsewhere in their community. I didn't really plan on taking up any more of your time tonight, but after having spoken last week, I've had several people reach out to me with their thoughts. Several mentioned, and I'm glad that the mayor mentioned this in her statement as well, that this is one of the only places in this community where they can go feeling fully comfortable being themselves. It is a space free of a lot of the boundaries that keep our community members out of other spaces. When I say that kids can plan and attend events here, I don't just mean high schoolers, but also people in college or their early 20s who are searching for their identities and their places to be. Safety issues has been invoked many times when it comes to targeting this space and other spaces where young people and black people congregate. I will say that I've been to a lot of rock shows and bars full of white people where fights have broken out, and never once have I been told to keep other white people in check if I wanted to keep the venue or bar open. I can't really tell you how sick I am of hearing about outlier safety issues. I'm happy to hear that the mayor and several council members are eager to find a solution. Mostly, I want to make sure that when you're thinking about this solution, please think about what efforts you can do to not just patch up, but strengthen this space so that we don't lose a building where people can feel comfortable being black, or gay, or a kid, trans, poor, Latina, an immigrant, non-English speaker, or anything. I'm not sure there's anything more important.
Thank you. Shelley Mazar. She had to leave, but she appreciates what's been said. Oh, okay. Matthew Murray. Well, what she wrote, I'll read. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. IMC number 12. The IMC is that Verity, I think, an entry-level arts venue that serves both white and black citizens, young and older. Variety. This was Shelley Mazard. Matt, you don't want to speak? Oh, okay. Drop fines and fees for IMC programs. Fees against IMC. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Paul Moots. How do I say it? Mute.
I respond to like 7 or 8 variants pronunciation. I get used to that. Well, I associate myself with everything that's been said, and I don't know why I need to get up here and say anymore, but I do want to mention that Mike Ingram is co-signed with this letter that may be in your packet from 123 people to you today in support of the IMC. Maybe I'll just add something that I noted in the sort of capitulation of some of the relations in the past, and it was like a flow over into Lincoln Square. There was a hot summer about 3 summers ago where there were some fights that broke out in the parking garage where people were waiting, and it was mainly African American youth that caused police calls, and I don't think they were tallied to the IMC. It was long enough ago that it probably wasn't on that list, but I wasn't there for any of them, so I don't know how the interventions happened and what actually went down, but you know, any other group can't be responsible for after the fact, after they've left the premises. We tried to do what we can at the time. I was on the board, I think, at the time. So I wanted to add that, and it seems that that sort of set a tone for police reactions. Again, yeah, I want to applaud everything, and I do like the fact that our mayor brought up the third space. It's from a book called A Great Good Place, which I hope the IMC can continue to be, and I'm glad everybody's resolving to find a way through. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Brian Verweiss. Brian?
Hello, I'm Brian Vero Weiss, live on Mills Drive in Urbana. First, I'd like to thank the City Council for all the work that you do for us. And it is appreciated. Mayor Marlin, I really appreciate what you said at the beginning. I'm still upset with you because you took my best line. The line is unintended consequences. The last time I was here, I complained, and it was after a very eloquent young man talking about the bike share and got an award. I complained about the bikes that were everywhere. And I just came back from Providence, Rhode Island, where the bikes are everywhere, but they're bright orange. And I was trying to find a bike on my way here to find out what color they were, because I thought they were bright orange still, but no, they were that teal green. So you identified the problem and you solved the problem. And thank you. I think I have confidence that you'll do that here as well. You know, I re-looked at the IMC website. It's very impressive. Everything that people have said here, including you, Mayor Marlin, indicate that there will be a resolution. And thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? And I have several that are waiting for discussion, the discussion time at the end of the meeting. But do I have cards for you? Yes. Okay, let's see. So everyone wants to do it now? Okay, and what I have is Stuart Levy. Yep. Okay. Would you like to go now?
I could either go now or just before you put the discussion for that event, for that item. Line item, you tell me.
Oh, well, sweetie, pick a time. Okay. Yeah, she's right here. Yes. Well, Stuart's coming now. Thank you, Stuart.
Hi, and thanks for having us on your agenda. I'd like to speak to a couple things. So a lot of people have said you should be good to the IMC because the IMC does important work, and I certainly support that. But I also want to consider the application of this ordinance to the IMC. One of the things that disturbed me to read in the News Gazette a couple of days ago was that the city felt that it had no choice but to apply the ordinance in the way that it's been applied. So what I'm seeing is, so in the middle of March, there was an event with a liquor violation, and that caused a big stir. The police came out, as they should have. We shut down the event. Karen shut down the event, as she should have. And there's been a lot of activity in the IMC to make sure that it does not recur. Okay, but that was a liquor violation. There was no violence. I look at the text of Ordinance 1452C, and it says, it talks about application, use of city resources to, in cases of life, health, safety, or property. And unless the city is showing extraordinary concern for the future livers of Urbana, I don't see any of those here. And so I think it's a big deal that this ordinance is getting applied in this way. And I hope that the council will look into that and not just assume that the only thing is whether to let the IMC get away with it or not. Another thing that I wanted to say is something that has really impressed me over the last, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, has been the number of events at the IMC with a lot of black people, and not only arts events, but also you know, wedding parties and birthday parties and memorial services, and there's not many places in downtown Urbana where I can see that. There may have been a fair number at the Civic Center, but the city isn't running that anymore. And so the IMC is, may well be it. So I think, you know, besides the other reasons that I think it's a valuable place, I would take that as one. I'd like to mention an event thinking about police calls. There was an event this last weekend, a pretty cool thing. It was a hip hop competition. And Karen and I were the IMC representatives for it. And so the event got started about 9, it was hot, air conditioning wasn't really working. There were a lot of people out on the front steps of the IMC just kind of hanging out and chatting. And Karen and I had just gone and hung out with them for a little bit a few minutes earlier. And then we heard that somebody had called the police because there was a crowd on the steps of the IMC. And the police came over and they were very polite and wanted to see whether there was a permit. And so Karen showed them the permit and told them about the event and so forth, and they politely went away. So that's okay. But it's important to consider that things like that may happen when you're looking at when do police calls happen. In this case, there was nothing more than a bunch of people standing around and chatting on the steps of the IMC, and somebody called the police. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stuart. Sandra Alton. Yeah.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all and Karen for your eloquence in stating the issue. I would like to remind people that the building didn't just fall into our laps. It was really, you know, we rented to the post office for 10 years, or we gave it free to the post office for 10 years for them to be there while we tried to pay the bills. And it's not been easy to keep the IMC funded. It's been hard. And I was a founding funder. I'm not part of the board or anything, but I've started a lot of programs there. I helped fund books to prisoners, and I've been a part of so many spontaneous things. The flexibility and the spontaneity of the space is really vital to the space, to be able to put on events quickly. We all know it's kind of a pop-up culture these days. You have to respond quickly to things. And that IMC I would be like, oh, we need to plan on, you know, we're brainstorming, we need to think of something, where can we have a meeting? I've got a key to the IMC, let's get in there and have a meeting. And they happen that way, and then things happen. So just to say that. And then just from another point of view, besides being a lover of the IMC, I'm a business person here in Urbana. My husband and I own Elliott Counseling Group, and we have a office in the Lincoln Square Mall. But we have our Christmas parties there because we want to help financially support Urbana and the IMC. We could have them anywhere. We have them there. We pay the money. We pay the fee. But I don't want to pay a $100 fee. And I don't want to really, I'm not that great a planner. I don't want to plan it 45 days in advance necessarily. I want to find a place that I can rent when I need to rent it. When it's open. So just consider that when you're considering how to restructure. I really think the $100 is a little bit prohibitive even for businesses. So I'm not saying we should pay nothing like I believe all not-for-profits should. I don't think you should be profiting off of not-for-profits in your permitting. But also keep in mind that the people who have their birthday parties there and who rent there and do things to support the IMC, we could have events anywhere. There's weddings, there's all kinds of things there. They could have them anywhere. So they don't necessarily, even though they're not for profit, they don't need to be burdened with a $100 permitting fee and a 45-day notice either, in my opinion. So thanks for considering.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to speak at this time? Okay. What's your name, sweetie?
I submitted a form.
What is it?
Daria.
Daria Shanabi?
Shagabi.
Say it again.
Shagabi.
Shagabi.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Daria.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Daria Shagabi. I am a resident of Urbana and a member of the IMC. Although I'm not well versed on the rules and regulations that are being inflicted upon the IMC, I am well versed in the cultural importance that it has for our community. I would like to share a personal story, if that's okay. Okay, about a year ago, I went to a drag show at the IMC. It was this past June in 2018. This drag show was advertised as family friendly, so I took my daughter, who was around 1 at the time. My daughter had her first steps during this event. I would also like to note that this event took place after 8 p.m. The IMC has the potential to be a family-friendly event if you allow it to. Please do not let the bad just distract you from the good. I would also like to note that the IMC is the only place in our community that is accessible and inclusive. I would like to read the IMC's about, if that is okay. The IMC states, "We foster the creation and distribution of media, art, and narratives emphasizing underrepresented voices and perspectives, and promote empowerment and expression through media and arts education. To harshly regulate and restrict the IMC is to take away voices from the voiceless. This is the only place that disenfranchised members of our community have, and it acts as a protective factor for many. I urge you to reconsider. To inflict these constraints upon these people is to direct harm." Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have another, do I have input cards from anybody else that had wanted to speak? Sir, you in the back.
Jason Finkelman.
Jason. Okay, Jason Finkelman, please come forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Carson. Good evening. My name is Jason Finkelman. I've been a proud Urbana resident for 19 years now. I arrived here to be part of the University of Illinois from New York City. And as an artist, I've had very memorable performances and engagements personally at the IMC. But one of the things that that I'd like to mention in regard to the IMC is its incredible ability to be an incubator of ideas, and it's a incredible cultural and artistic asset to our community, providing a particular currency to what we offer here in Urbana. So I agree with all the people who've come up today and have shared their thoughts and ideas and opinions about what the IMC is. I think it's really beautiful, this turnout tonight, and I thank you all for listening. I do want to say, as my role as a community engagement programming part of the University of Illinois, the IMC has been invaluable to part of my programming, and I mentioned an incubator because when I first got involved with the IMC, when it was first opened on Main Street in Urbana, I created an event called the Improvisers Exchange. I just wrapped a 2-year initiative with the Center for Advanced Study at the University of Illinois, bringing internationally and nationally acclaimed artists to the University of Illinois and to the IMC for performances of music that requires a listening venue, not a venue that is a space that serves alcohol, not a venue that is a club, not a venue that expects some sort of large financial return to the art that operates outside of the margins of popular culture. And that's what I represent here tonight, is somebody who values an organization like the IMC to provide that type of service to our city of Urbana that celebrates the arts. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Danielle, did you want to speak now, or you want to wait until discussion time? Okay. Nick Goodall? Yeah. Is that you? Yeah. Okay. Where's Danielle?
Oh, this is slow. Okay. So hi, my name is Nick. I've been recently elected to the board of the IMC, but I've been a patron there and a happy patron since I moved here a few years ago as a student at the university. When I first moved here, I started a podcast with my friend on WRFU, the radio show the radio station that's hosted out of the IMC. We were immediately impressed by the warmth and the resources of everybody at the IMC. You know, met a lot of great people right off the bat, like Stuart, who spoke earlier, and just were very impressed with that space. And so I want to say, first, it is, as everybody has said already tonight, it's a very valuable space for the community, and we need to be doing our utmost to keep it in its current form and not be putting all these hefty regulations on it that really it cannot afford to be having right now. And so tonight, real quick, I want to tell a quick story about my experience with calling the police actually to the IMC. So it was a few years ago, and my friend and I had just gotten done hosting our radio show, and it was about 8 o'clock for reference. And my friend had left his backpack in the main atrium of the IMC outside of the radio show studio. And we got out there and discovered that it had been gone through, it had been ransacked. He lost a pair of his glasses, and we didn't know what to do, and we were scared, so we did what a lot of people would do. We called the police to the IMC. And so about 50 minutes later, a police officer showed up, was as helpful as he could be. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot that he could do in that situation, and we don't blame him for that. You know, there's not a lot you can do in that situation, unfortunately. But I want to point out that with this ordinance that was passed in late 2017, I don't know if something like that happened at the IMC again in the future, if I would call the police. Because as Belden pointed out, it seems like if you call the police now to a public space like the IMC, you're going to be putting a mark against the IMC in the future. And I do not think that is right at all. I think that this ordinance, which is designed supposedly to enhance the safety of public spaces, is in fact harming the safety of public spaces in this way. Yeah, so I recommend, as others have said, that you lift the probationary period off of the IMC, you return the $300, and that you treat the IMC like the other public spaces in town, like the library or like university spaces, where if a backpack is rummaged through and the police are called at the library, nothing bad happens to the library in return. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Karhik Kakarala? Kakarela. Not sure how to say it.
Yes, hello. Karthik Kakarala.
Say it again, Karthik?
Karthik Kakarala.
Kakarela, thank you.
If you haven't met me, it's probably because we don't go to the same music shows. I go to a good number of them. Before I lived in Champaign County, and which was during the whole course of this ordinance, I also grew up in Springfield, Illinois, which also had a pretty booming DIY scene. But most of those spaces would only last 2 or 3 years at a time. It was hard to build any sort of momentum. But during that 2018 through now stretch, I have been playing and attending IMC shows. Actually, as of recently, I am now also a board member at the IMC because I value the importance of this space. So I'm going to go with the rest of my time being a local community member from Champaign. I'll try to keep it within a pop song. My name is Ash Smith. I've been coming to shows at the IMC for probably about 11 years now. For the first time earlier this year, I was actually able to play the stage there. The music scene is starting to fade in Champaign, Urbana. There are maybe 2 small handfuls of venues left in town, some of them are only available in the summer. However, the only secure, safe, accessible, all-ages space that I can think of is the IMC. It provides somewhere for younger generations to be exposed to something that can become a healthy outlet. At 17, when I started going, I am positive that I wouldn't have been comfortable in a tiny basement venue surrounded by people, as that's what makes up the majority of the DIY scene. As a queer, disabled person, the IMC has offered me a lot of comfort where other venues were lacking. Footnotes being ramps, a low stage, allowance of service animals. Do we really want to take that away, that sort of space for other people, for future generations? I completely understand safety concerns. A few years ago, I interned at another all-ages space in town that no longer exists, and we were faced with the same issues. However, when we weighed our concerns against the benefits we provided the community, we came to the conclusion that we were too necessary to let the risks deter us. Unfortunately, there's no way for anyone to completely prevent someone from sneaking in things or acting inappropriately, but I believe that since the incidents that sparked this conflict, security has tightened and things have been safer. Requiring permits for events past 8 p.m. is also very inconvenient, as a lot of the times the touring bands are obviously coming from out of town, and trying to rush their travel is unfair and unreasonable. In addition, some of these shows are not always well attended, and the promoter has to pull money out of their own pockets to make sure that the touring bands make enough gas money to get to their next show. The cost of permits would require us to increase the cover at the doors, once again making it more difficult for some people to attend. We need the IMC. What other venue in town is as considerate for differently abled humans? What other non-house venue do we have where members of the queer community feel safe? What other all-ages spaces out there host DIY shows? It has been very inspiring to watch the promoters that work with the IMC start to bring the scene back. But we've just started. There's a long way to go. We're on the right track now, and I'd hate to see that end so soon. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of my friend and local community member.
Thank you. I would like to add a little something. Can I say something? If that is not, of course, about IMC, but I hadn't prepared anything, actually, but I wanted to state that a dear community friend of ours passed yesterday unexpectedly, Carletta Donaldson. And I think everyone in this room has probably known her on some level, once in some way or another. And I would just like to acknowledge that she will be missed. And she was and has been a friend of mine for a while. It was unexpected for all of us. I thank Dr. Reverend for calling me, because I had no idea. But I've been a friend of her family's for quite some time, since I was a little girl. And I wanted to just say that I think we all would say that our prayers and our thoughts are with the Donaldson family, since Mrs. Willetta Donaldson just passed in February. 5 months and 5 days later, her daughter went to join her. And that's all I can say right now. So that's my input for tonight. Are there any other public input? Any more public input tonight? Any presentations tonight? Moving on then. Okay, seeing no presentations. Staff reports. No staff reports. Then let's move on. We have resolution number 2019-07-026R, a resolution certifying a community housing development organization for the Urbana Home Consortium, Habitat PY 2018. Sheila Dodd is here to speak to us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, or good evening. The resolutions before you. Sorry. The resolutions before you are an opportunity to provide affordable housing funds to Habitat for Humanity. The City of Urbana is the lead agency for the home funds that we receive from the federal government that covers Urbana, Champaign, and unincorporated Champaign County. We are required by the federal government to set aside 15% of that grant to be given to a CHODO, or a community housing development organization. Currently, Habitat for Humanity is our only CHODO in the consortium area. They have applied for funding. They applied to be certified first, and then they've applied for funding to construct 4 houses, 3 in Champaign and 1 in Urbana, as well as requested operating funds to help them in this endeavor. The funds can be spent, since it's a joint grant, anywhere in the consortium area. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Dennis.
Really, I don't. I support the nomination of Habitat because they've done such excellent work in our community for so many years. So I'd like to recommend approval of resolution certifying the Community Housing Development Organization for the Urbana Home Consortium concerning Habitat for the fiscal year 2018, and recommend it be passed and forwarded to the City Council with approval.
Second.
Okay, well, I wanted to say one thing. This and 3 other resolutions are possible for a consent agenda. Would we like to put these in for a consent agenda? Because three of our resolutions are all in one. And if we can put those 3 and possibly item number 10 as well. Do I make a motion to make this consent agenda? Or do I do that?
Well, the easiest way is for each of these to be sent to council with a recommendation and to be put on the consent agenda. One motion with the two pieces, and then we do 4 motions for each of the items. And you could actually, and likewise, the GIS Consortium item could also be, the 5 items could be sent if there's agreement.
Okay. So we're
So
gonna listen.
So I'll modify that and say that I would like to forward it to the city council on a consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, and that is moved by Dennis and seconded by Bill. Okay. Moving on to the next resolution. No, oh, any questions? Any discussion? Discussion regarding resolution 2019-07026R? Okay, move to, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Then moving on to the resolution number 2019-07027R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organization Agreement, Habitat Choto, operating PY 2018.
And again, that's part of the same application to help them construct the 4 houses, 3 in Champaign and 1 in Urbana. Yes, ma'am.
And Mary Alice?
I'd like to move forward resolution number 2019-07027R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organizational Agreement with a recommendation for approval to City Council and on the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, that was moved by Mary Alice Wu and seconded by Dee Hazen. Is there any discussion regarding the resolution? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to number 9, resolution number 2019-07-028R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organization Agreement, Habitat Choto Developer TY 2018. And Sheila?
This developer agreement is, outlines the home regulations as well as the funds available in this program year 18 to build 4 houses in Champaign and Urbana.
And so somebody needs to make a motion. Go ahead.
Right. I'd like to make that motion to send resolution 2019-07-028R, which is with the authorizing execution of a Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organization Agreement with Habitat Choto Developer for the fiscal year 2018, forward to the City Council with approval as part of a consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. It has been moved by Dennis and seconded by Mary Alice. And now, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 10, which can also be included in the consent agenda. Resolution number 2019-07-029R, a resolution approving amendment number 1 to an emergency solutions grant subrecipient agreement with the CU Men's Shelter.
The City of Urbana is a pass-through agency for the State of Illinois Emergency Solutions Grant. We were notified during this fiscal year that they did some reallocation. We were awarded $25,000, and that allocation is not increased, but how we could spend the money was. So we had to reallocate $1,105 for eligible activities. Because the men's shelter opened earlier and stayed open longer than anticipated, the 2 agencies that were funded agreed that they would be eligible for the funds, and that would be for the CU Men's Shelter.
Okay. Motion?
Yeah, I move to send resolution number 2019-07-029R, resolution approving amendment number 1 to Emergency Solutions Grant subrecipient agreement with CU Men's Shelter to City Council with recommendation for approval and to add to this consent agenda.
Second?
I'll second that. And I'd like to say that also that it was important for us to know that they were going to expand their the months of service to the community, and that's why we really were supporting them. And they did that, so thank you very much.
So it has been moved by Bill and seconded by Dennis to move that also for approval to the City Council. Ordinance.
You have to vote, though.
Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Number 11, item number 11, ordinance number 2019-07-038, an ordinance amending the intergovernmental agreement for the creation of the Champaign County Geographic Information System Consortium. And, okay, we have Sanford to give us information.
Good evening.
Hey.
So the GIS Consortium, a little background for those of you who are not, were not part of this when it was created in 2002. It was an agreement by several entities in the area, including Champaign County, the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, Village of Savoy, Village of Rental, Village of Mahomet, and the University of Illinois. And they all got together and realized that they could be more effective working with a single group to do mapping for the area. And so all those agencies have worked together since 2002. They formed a consortium. The county is the lead agency for the consortium. City of Urbana has a original membership, and so we have a board seat. I attend the meetings. The consortium does an excellent job providing services that are very valuable to the city. In 2018, the Tolono approached the consortium with a desire to potentially consider membership. At the time, we read the original agreement, and the verbiage of the agreement says that they would have to pay in a share in order that would go all the way retroactively to 2002 and to pay their fair share of the original startup costs. And that wasn't going to work. So rather than create such a huge burden for new agencies to join, we decided that a more fair approach would be, and we wound up, and these verbiage changes are summarized in the memo, which comes before the agreement. So the changes you're being asked, and all of the agencies you're being asked to approve into the agreement, are to allow an a new member to join by providing a single one-time payment of 3 times their yearly membership fee. And membership fees are based on the share of the population. So that seemed like a fair way to us to give, well, they have to put some skin in the game, but it's only 3 years of the cost, and from that point forward, they would be an equal member with everybody else. That updated section 19. That also changed the language in section 15, which says what happens if the consortium is terminated and we have to dissolve it. It originally said everybody would get a share back, but now we've amended that to say that if someone came in late, they would not get as much of the assets returned to them as the original members. So those are the 2 sections of the agreement that had to be amended. I am here to answer any further questions.
Bill?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I did notice looking through the agreement, in Appendix A, the fees are still, the per capita rates are still based on population from the 2000 census. I was wondering why they didn't update it to 2010, and we've had that out for 7 years or so.
I can tell you that the ongoing rates are set by current numbers. So it's possible that just Appendix A reflected what was in effect at the time of the agreement, but I can ask them to update this with language that suggests that it is always based on current numbers.
Okay. Thanks.
I know it's current numbers because I know that very recently they actually increased the fees for Savoy and Mahomet due to their increase in population.
Then I'll move to send ordinance Yeah, ordinance number 2019-07-038, ordinance amending intergovernmental agreement for creation of Champaign County Geographic Information System Consortium to City Council with recommendation for approval and to add to the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, that has been moved by Bill and seconded by Mary Alice. Discussion? No discussion? No questions? While Mr. Hess is still here? Okay, in that case, can I get approval? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okie dokie. And so, next item on the agenda is discussion, section 1452, event applications, permits, deadlines, late applications. Council members Wu and Jacobson.
Since Eric is on the telephone, should we let him go first?
Okay, go ahead, Eric. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, do we have a staff report regarding that?
Well, I just
First.
had a couple of comments that I might share.
Okay, Eric, can Carol go first?
Sure. I just want to make sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. I'll let Carol go first.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just had a few things I wanted to share. First, I appreciate the council's forbearance last week in allowing me some time to collect the relevant background documents and share them with you. I had been involved in a high level with some of the recent dealings with the IMC related to Section 1452C, but before I responded, I wanted to make sure that I had my facts straight. And so I had shared the packet of materials with you all over the weekend and with the leadership from the IMC. And I appreciate Ms. Medina pointing out that the attachment titled Calls for Service, January 1 of 2017 to July 3rd of 2019 might give the mistaken impression that these were all calls for service at the IMC. So I'm glad she clarified that, because that was definitely not the case. I want to say that I think the crux of the challenge in this case is defining the degree of control intended by the council in creating the 12-month probationary status in Section 1452C. By invoking controls over similar events, there is no guidance in the ordinance on how those events should be identified. We have been struggling with, in ongoing negotiations with the IMC, what events do we really want to exert some additional control over during this 12-month period. I do think there is sufficient latitude granted in the ordinance as written that we can achieve a meeting of the minds through good faith negotiations with the IMC to really limit what we're trying to go after. And we're looking forward to the meeting with the IMC leadership on Wednesday. That's not to say that I don't think the ordinance should be amended. I do think the ordinance should be amended. I think we've gained some valuable insight through this experience, but I don't think that any changes need to be made precipitously. I think there is more than one way to amend our code to better relate to an events space use type like the IMC, and those alternatives deserve thoughtful consideration. The last thing I'd like to say before taking questions is about the special event permitting process with the IMC since March 22nd. And I have prepared a matrix which shows, at least what I'm aware of based on what staff shared with me, that there have only been, if you could just pass that around, and if Karen or anybody from the IMC want to get a copy or two. We've only received 5 applications. One of those was submitted twice. We denied it the first go-around and approved it the second. 5 applications since March 22nd. Based on the feedback we're getting directly from event sponsors, and not unlike what we've heard tonight, I think the biggest hurdle is the amount of the application fee, which is something the council can consider changing. The special event permit application fee was increased to $100 with the changes to the overall fee schedule to better reflect the cost of city resources to review these permits. It still doesn't cover all our costs. So lowering the fee or waiving it entirely would mean that we would be moving backwards on cost recovery. So if the council wants to consider a reduced fee or no fee, at least for the moment, I'd recommend a narrow carve-out for applications that would be coming in under this section 1452C probationary period. So those are just a few thoughts I wanted to share by way of introduction before the council members want to speak, and if there's any additional public input, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Would that particular fee, you said carving out, would that mean for all nonprofits, a particular, a lower fee for nonprofit?
What I was speaking to specifically was just for anyone who's on probation, anything that would be coming in that context.
So a probationary fee for the 12-month time, and then it would, but for everyone else, it would be the regular $100.
$100, yeah. And I do want to clarify one thing, and I think Jim and I have the same understanding, which is we never had an official carve-out or exemption for nonprofits, but there had been in this ordinance and in the fee schedule. I think there had been some informal waivers, but without staff authority to do so. But there can be, if the council wants to grant such authority, that's something that you can talk about, certainly.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Carol? Dennis?
Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown about what staff time is required to be covered by the fee of $100? I mean, that sounds like quite a few hours of work, perhaps?
Well, it's touching a lot of departments, and frankly, the thing, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to show you the matrix, just to show you a few different things, but one of the things that we experience a lot is we get incomplete applications. So then there's a fair amount of follow-up with the folks, and this is not isolated to this. It's true of liquor license applications, special event permit applications, where staff has to make a series of phone calls, explain the process. So clearly we could be doing more to make it clear what people need, but I think we also need to once we have that clarity, not be taking in applications that are incomplete, because that generates a lot more staff time. But it can take hours of staff time. Starts in public works and then it circulates around in the police department. If someone submits a security plan that's good to go, that's a quick thing to approve, but many times it's not. So that requires some conversation and interaction.
And since I've never filled out an application in this area, if the applications online need to be more clearly stated or more information addended to them so that the applications can be more completely filled out, or more appropriately whatever is considered to be a safety program for the use of the initiation of the event could be clearly stated, then maybe we'd get more complete applications? Or
yeah,
is
we
it
clearly
just
there's clearly room for improvement just on the city side in the generic special event permitting process.
Okay. All right.
Bill?
Yeah, I have a question about how Section 1452C was invoked in this case. The way I understand it, reading C, it says permit required notwithstanding subsection B exemption, and anything, and then if a person conducts or hosts an event which was exempt under subsection B, and then the other one is within 10 business days after the last date of the event which was exempt under subsection B. Which of those exemptions under subsection B did the IMC fall under? It looks like those are for like...
The exemption that was invoked that was then violated on March 15th was the lack of an alcoholic or liquor license, temporary liquor license. So that they would have been exempt for an event that does not require a liquor license, but because they violated that, then the exemption is no longer invoked according to subsection C. Did I say that right?
I don't see that liquor license
I don't either.
listed.
Yeah, I I don't either. I looked through the ordinance pretty carefully. I didn't see that the IMC had an exemption at all.
Yeah.
There's
But
an
it was in
exemption
any
for
of
the
the
Civic
categories.
Center.
Jim's going to help me.
What I see is B5, events hosted by liquor licensees. If such events are confined, otherwise I don't even see any mention of it.
In my mind, this was one of the fundamental flaws as I looked at what was happening with respect to our ordinance, is that I didn't see that there was any exemption for the IMC at all that could be revoked because it didn't exist.
That's the way I read it too.
Yep, I agree.
Me too.
Jim's going to explain it. It's a lawyer thing. I don't feel I'll do it justice.
I'll just confuse you more. It starts out with the definition of special event. C, a special event, one of the defining characteristics of something that makes an event a special event under this ordinance is that there will be selling or serving or allowing to be sold or served or consumed alcohol. So we start out with that. So the presumption is, starting there, that if no alcohol is present or consumed or served, it's not a special event. So then we go with the exemptions. However, as noted under C, it says notwithstanding anything to the contrary in subsection B. Well, let's go back to B. Number 6 is an event which is confined wholly within the walls. Nope, that's Civic Center. Well, there's no the point is it's not a special event. So, with no alcohol on private property. All right, you go to C. I can find C here.
Mary Alice, do you have a question?
I do. So, okay, so if we are saying that the only time it is a special event is if they are serving or selling or allowing another person to serve or sell alcoholic consumption on or off site of the event, or allow a person to consume alcoholic liquor at the site of and during the event. In that case, if that is the only definition for a special event, then how can we say that any event that doesn't have alcohol is now considered a special
But the point is alcohol was found at the March 15 event.
Yeah, but I'm saying we are defining what
I
a
asked a question.
special.
I'd like to have that answered
I'm
first.
sorry.
and then
I
submit.
apologize. Go for it.
Okay.
So my question was, which exemption in 1452B allowed you to invoke 1452C? They don't qualify under any of those exemptions. They weren't exempt. What happened was they had an event that wasn't a special event until someone brought the alcohol in, then that made it a special event. They didn't have a permit, so they get fined $300, period. They learned their lesson. That's the way I would have looked at how this should have been invoked.
Well, you're talking
No
two different things.
probationary period would have been allowed
No.
because they didn't have an exemption to begin with, and they didn't violate their exemption.
But they had alcohol at the event. It says on C, notwithstanding anything to the contrary in B, there's not a special event. If a person conducts an event or hosts an event which was exempt under B, your point is that it wasn't exempt under B.
Exactly.
It couldn't be, quote, exempt the list under B because it didn't fall in until the alcohol came in. Until it came in with alcohol, then it becomes a special event, which requires a permit.
But these items under C only apply to organizations that can qualify for exemptions. They never could have applied for, never could have qualified under any of those things as an exemption.
So essentially what you're saying is any organization that doesn't plan on selling alcohol at an event, therefore not being a special event, but somebody comes in and starts serving alcohol, they don't need a permit.
We're not talking about whether it's a special event or not. We're talking about whether they require a permit. The exemption is for
I would
requiring
agree
a
that
permit.
this needs to be cleaned up.
Okay.
I would agree.
Otherwise, prom is a special event.
I just don't think the interpretation that was made, the interpretation that's been made of this ordinance, to me, defies common sense.
Thank you, Eric. Mary Alice, did you have something else you wanted to? Because you weren't finished.
I have lots of questions, but I will.
Okay.
Before I jump into my questions, may I have permission to read Jared's statement, because he asked me to read a statement?
Okay.
Cherise?
Yes,
Do I
you
have
do
your
have permission to read
Thank
Jared's
you.
statement.
All right, so Jared Miller was not able to attend tonight and requested that I read a statement. To my fellow council members, city staff, and supporters of the IMC, my thanks to Alderperson Mary Alice Wu for taking the time to read this letter in my absence. I regret that I am not there this evening to participate in this discussion and lend my experiences and knowledge to a resolution of the matter at hand. First, I would like to make it known, if it is not clear already, that I am adamantly and wholeheartedly opposed to the new status quo that is presented to the IMC by city staff. I am not sure exactly how we got to this point, even in light of the evidence provided to us by city staff. Further, I find the evidence provided as justification for the actions undertaken by the city to be both underwhelming and exceptional. I find the evidence underwhelming as I have personal experience with and knowledge of many hundreds of events that have occurred over the past years with no instances of violence, drug use, or other violations of city ordinances. I have organized many such events myself at the IMC. Additionally, I believe that exceptional attention and detail is being applied to those events mentioned in the city's memo and supporting evidence. That one or two instances this year and a small smattering of events in the past are being used as justification for such broad and onerous restrictions is absolutely unfair. That being said, I would hope that no one in support of the IMC and no one who has in-depth knowledge of its history and no one on its board or staff thinks of the IMC as infallible. In order to move forward, those who support the IMC must be willing to admit and take responsibility for the mistakes where and when they are made. It should be no secret to anyone that throughout the history of the IMC, there have been periods of lax enforcement of the rules, which the IMC has always maintained are part of its mission to provide a safe and welcoming space for all. I have personally witnessed violations of our ordinances, both since I have been on council and prior to my service, when I had no idea what an ordinance even was. In no way should this criticism be misconstrued as support of what is happening between the city and the IMC today, but everyone needs to understand that this is not just a one-sided issue. Moving forward, I believe that a thoughtful and mutually beneficial resolution to the issues we are facing here today is certainly within reach. I believe that if the argument is being made that the city cannot help but enforce the ordinance because the ordinance does not allow for discretion in the imposition of subsection 1452C, I think we all have that memorized now, then we must change the ordinance to allow for that discretion. If the ordinance regulating special events is itself generally too burdensome, then simply put, it must too be changed to allow for a lighter touch than where warranted. I am not advocating for carte blanche to be given to the IMC or any other venue to hold events in whatever manner they so choose, but we must come to a mutual resolution that does not so broadly restrict so many of the events that are hosted at the IMC. Lastly, I want to make it clear that while there will be no vote held tonight and further discussion will likely be required to come to a resolution, it is the opinion of this council member that the city must lift its current restrictions and requirements of the IMC while a solution to this issue is found. I do not believe that the majority of the city council or mayor support a regulatory stranglehold on the IMC, and I urge my fellow council members and the mayor to make it very clear that any such continued action will be to the detriment of our entire community. I do not support any of the 8 points of restrictions spelled out in the letter from the city to the IMC dated June 11, 2019, except for events where such burdens are truly justified, and if we must define that justification further, then we must do so immediately. I believe that the city has made it far too easy for far too many events to be placed under these restrictions, and it must reserve course on this decision. If the intent of the city is to be proactive and less reactive, as has been stated, then perhaps the city should consider working with IMC to receive a grant from the city that will allow them to hire, train, and/or pay for proper security personnel. Perhaps a grant that will pay for a new set of locks for the doors to the IMC that we all know there are many copies of floating around in town, and undoubtedly people are using to access the space without the permission of the IMC. We should be looking for mutually beneficial solutions, not throwing blame around without being willing to help in ways that actually matter. Any of these solutions would be better than unduly burdening the IMC with a blanket of exceptional restrictions and red tape in order to prevent minor and rare instances of unfortunate behavior by a few key individuals. Thank you all for your time and patience in listening to this letter. I will be watching this issue closely. Sincerely, Jared Miller, Alderman for Ward 7.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Danielle, did you wish to speak now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
First off, I just want to give my condolences to Carlotta Donaldson and her family. And I was very shocked by the information, and thank you, Ms. Hersey, for sharing it. My name is Danielle Chenoweth. I live at 412 West Illinois Street. I've lived in Urbana since 1995. I'm one of 12 founders of the Independent Media Center. It actually started in my living room off Carl Park. I'm sure we didn't have a permit for that, but we did meet and share food and equipment. And until December of 2016, when I stepped off the board and out of the presidency, I really lived and breathed the IMC, its financial troubles, its venue issues. It has been a very long labor of love of tending and caring for the garden, which is the IMC. I want to thank the mayor for our conversation today. Joel Sanders, who from the get-go has been one of the most wonderful collaborators in this process, has met with us, answered our phone calls, talked to us. We've had a lot of difficult and transformative conversations, and I felt like the Urbana Police Department has really stepped up and stepped out to reach out to the IMC and build bridges. And I feel like that is starting with the executive as well, and I look forward to the future. We talk about the IMC. When we founded the IMC, we founded it as a third place. We're a college town where young people don't have a place that is alcohol-free to go. We see that every day with the young people who were kicked out of the library and then kicked out of the Lincoln Square. And now we're at the IMC, and we struggle, honestly, with that situation. And I think once this conversation is over, I'd really like to engage you in talking about how we can collaborate to provide a third place beyond what we're doing now for those youth. As Karen mentioned, it's a group of youth that really have caused the issues in 2019, and I don't want those youth to go away. I want them to come in and make media. I want them to make art. I want them to feel at home. I want them to stop breaking things. I want them to stop creating disturbances. Well, one youth, we had one of the incidents that you listed was actually a time when the parents were inside having a conversation about how to interrupt violence in the schools. We were hosting that kind of trauma-informed conversation, and the youth were outside, and there was an altercation. It's called a fight. There was actually we were trying so hard to have that conversation, and there was probably inappropriate behavior happening on the steps, but I just wanted to provide context that when you see fight, you didn't see the word also parents grappling with this issue and trying to address this. And so I would like us to, hopefully the silver lining of all of this is one that we understand each other better, that we can collaborate, and that we can really help to grow the IMC from what it is now. It's a bad timing for us. We've had our worst financial year last year. So being hit with this in the midst of that was very, very difficult. When I stepped off the board, I handed a very solid financial plan to folks, and some, cars got wrecked in the process, metaphorically, and we are rebuilding the IMC as a result of that. I've stepped back onto the board as treasurer primarily and we are now revenue positive, and the community has given us over $10,000 in support, in addition to, of course, the state, et cetera. I wanted to, I feel like the letter that we outlined are the three things that we're looking for in this, or four things. And I guess I just want to tell the council that what we need you to do is maybe make some very specific short-term solutions. Like if we keep throwing permits at the police and Public Works, they're probably not going to like us very much because we did like, what was it, 3 last week? And I mean, it's been a deluge and it's going to be even more. We've mostly canceled events. So when you got 3, that's like down from what it would have been had we not personally written checks back to the people who had paid us for these events and said, we're sorry, we can't manage this right now. So maybe you could look at some kind of interim solution where you're not charging that $100 fee. It's very frustrating to me to see that that fee went up without a memo on the front and that it went up 400%. You probably didn't know that happened and that you voted on it, and that the nonprofit exemption, which was there when I was on city council 15 years ago, was kind of quietly taken away 2 months after this conflict started. So I feel like that's a bigger issue that you as a council have to deal with. You need to have a conversation with the city staff about how that happened and make sure that you course correct around that. But going forward, we're asking for some short-term, hey, like, can we agree to something beyond just 8 p.m. because you're still going to get a lot of permits from us. We're going to have to pay money we don't have, and we're scrambling. And then I really think you need to look at, a broad look at that ordinance and the permit process generally. And then I would love to, we're going to meet with the mayor on Wednesday, and certainly we'll mostly talk about the details of this situation, but could we please sit down and talk about what collaboration looks like going forward? Because you do have a hotel project going in right next door. We are an event center for people who are at that project. Urbana is considered a pretty sleepy town, and I really feel like we have a lot to partner with, both with the young people and with the events going on in downtown. And lastly, I would say my hope for all of this is for transformative justice. So when Joel and I sat down and we talked about what security means, he had one picture of security, which is a lot like my cousin, who's also a police officer in Kentucky, who, ex-cops and military folks with a great security plan. He even said, Danielle, not to be insulting, but people are not going to, I told him I was running security, and he's like, folks are not going to feel particularly scared of you. And I said, well, maybe in meetings, but yes, probably not at a party. But I said, security looks different for gay, lesbian, transgender folks. It looks different for black folks. It looks different for young people. And so I want to keep having those conversations with the Urbana Police Department and with Public Works and with your administration to talk about a different way of thinking about security, one that's actually going to bring our cultural competence as a 19-year-old arts center together with the cultural competence of the police and Public Works and fire, et cetera, so that we can come up with what is security going to look like in a way that doesn't chase young people and vulnerable people and undocumented folks away, but actually going to make them feel included and welcome and whole. And that is what we want at the IMC. We want inclusion, welcoming, and wholeness. We want to build beloved community, and we want to fix the broken hearts that people have growing up in a society that excludes and marginalizes a number of people. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. We have any more discussion regarding the IMC? Yes.
I'm going to take my time back from Jared here for a second, since he's not here. I think that I want to thank the staff. I know there was a lot of documentation, the police department, Jim, your office, and Carol, your office, certainly everybody who's come out and given us unique perspectives in terms of their passion for the IMC and what their experience has been with the IMC. So I think that we've had a lot of different voices, and I'm really happy to see that, and a lot of talk about how do we move forward from here. So with that said, and I actually came up with a very similar idea that Danielle was talking about, which is there has to be a short term and a long term right here. So long term, I would hope that the council and the mayor would agree that we have to fix this ordinance. Long term, I think everybody's been talking about fixing this ordinance. I would like to add to that, I did not realize that a special events fee would impact small local cultural and art centers. And so with that in mind, I also think that we need to talk about how do we change that and make it more affordable for people with small events to be able to put on something when they are required to have a permit. So I'd like to put that on the agenda as well. But the third one, which is a little trickier, is how do we in the short term ensure that the IMC and the people who want to hold events at the IMC are able to do so while we figure out all the details. We don't want to rush into something and just make a bad ordinance worse. We want to make a bad ordinance good and to work well for the community and for the city. So my first question to staff is this. There was a lot of conversation among staff and the IMC board in terms of how do we define what events this applies to. There was a proposal to have an 8 p.m. kind of cutoff. If it was at 8 p.m. or later, then the special events would have to apply for a permit. The IMC came back with kind of a change in that, a suggestion in terms of making events that were at 9 p.m. with not augmented sound, but amplified sound. Thank you. So my question to the city staff is the concern regarding with that proposal. Why was it not accepted?
I think Joel will join us on that one.
All right. Just sit here.
Okay. Is that on now? Okay. I thought I was going to be able to get away without talking tonight. So the proposal was that it was threefold, really. It was 9 p.m., it was amplified music, and it was within the performance area. The 9 p.m., I don't know that, I think that's worth talking about. I think that's a conversation we can have moving it to the 9. The amplified music becomes ambiguous when the police are standing there inside responding to a problem and somebody's got a Walkman or some other item and says, well, this isn't amplified music. What becomes amplified music? At what point do we say it is? Or somebody says, well, it was on and now it's off. So I think it's very difficult to define what is amplified music. And the other issue then you get into is, so I want to have this event, but I'm going to hold it downstairs instead of here, and now it becomes a problem. That event takes a direction that's unintended. None of the problems we've ever responded to there did anybody start off that night saying, we're going to cause a problem this evening. I mean, they all were unintended issues. Does that make sense?
So what I'm hearing you say is that the time might be amenable to further conversation. The amplified sound is not very clearly defined, and the unintended consequences of having it in a specific location could force people to another location. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think, so here's the issue. The issue is that, well, I'm going to step back for a second. Carol, did you have an opportunity to look at the list of events that the IMC provided to us with the yellow and the green?
Yes.
Joel, did you have an opportunity to look at those?
I looked at it, but then I got caught up in putting everything together for tonight, so I did not study it.
I'm curious if those are accurate. So the IMC went through, and based on their understanding of the letter that we sent them, they highlighted different events that they felt would fall under those guidelines, and with their new proposal, they had the green, which would be those events that would fall under that proposal, versus the yellow.
We have that in front.
Okay, so here's my rationale, and I think I'm not going to speak for the IMC. I'm just going to kind of say what I think you guys have been saying, which is there's a lot of variety of different kinds of events that are hosted at the IMC, from dances to music to poetry reading to workshops, community meetings. There's a wide variety. Our ordinance specifically states that it is a similar event.
Right.
And I think this is really where we're all struggling.
Right.
Okay, so if the ordinance is a similar event, and the event that sparked this concern was a music event, that would lead us to the idea that music events, this might apply to, if we go down that road for a moment. All those other events, the poetry reading, the community workshops, all that stuff is not a similar event. And so my first question is, based on your very quick glance at that paper in front of you, do those events fall under your instructions to the IMC, the yellow events? The letters that we sent to them, do those specific events fall under that?
Here's what I'm struggling with is we've been sort of I think we've been narrowing the definition of or our attempt at a definition of similar events, and we hadn't concluded that. So what I'm hoping is that we will have a productive and come to have a productive conversation on Wednesday and come to some conclusions when the decision makers are sitting together.
Come to some conclusions on what that similar event
that little
definition
subset
is.
that we want to exercise some additional control over what that little subset looks like. It's clearly not going to be everything that's on this paper.
Okay.
Okay. Joel? Is it Joel?
Jim.
No, Jim.
I don't want to
Sorry.
speak for Joel, but to my understanding, I was not at the meeting in June when Joel met with folks from the IMC. But it's my understanding, because it wasn't clear, they had some confusion, and we probably weren't as clear as we should have been. But I believe Joel talked about the kind of events, I think almost every one that you mentioned, that would not be subject to seeking a permit. Children's events, poetry readings, those, he had a list of events that he apparently went through and all. And I to my understanding, it was, in words, clarify. And, so as I'm seeing it, the communications going both ways were not as clear as they should have been.
I think what's clear is there's more to it than just time of day. We've heard about events that are have children, small children at them that go after 8 o'clock at night. So, those are not what we're trying to capture. And I really I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I really do believe we're going to come to a very small subset when we sit down and have a conversation that is a real, and I don't want to, and I absolutely do not want to undermine any of the conversations that have been had so far, but one where it's just, I think we've all come to a better understanding of the limitations of the ordinance, and once we, I think, give ourselves a little bit more liberty to make interpretations that get at this really narrow group of events, I think we'll be able to come to some decisions.
Dennis?
Well, this is unpromising because certainly we want to support the events that the IMC sponsors because they are transformative to the community. And it's, I have a little bit of concern that the city has been using its enforcement in policy, and that also, if we're turning to our city attorney for advice, and it's not clear through discussion that exactly the definitions are very need to be defined more, or to make choices about what events should be receiving penalties and fines, then I want the city attorney to also be responsible for understanding the direction and the intent of the ordinance. And if it's not clear, then we need to have you come back and ask us for clarity. Because we're now applying and using our city's attorney's position to enforce what I think are become punitive actions. And it upsets me that we're using our regulatory powers in ways that are not really intended, I think, by the city's wish to support active and diverse community events. So, and it also was disturbing to me to find that one of the signal events that initiated some of the 12-month probation was an event which actually was a call for police to attend a fight that was in the parking garage, but because the people came from something that was going at the IMC, but they had left the premises. If they're no longer on the premises, how can it possibly be the IMC's responsibility for those activities? So, I mean, it was confusing to me to read about that and find out that that was one of the marked events which initiated all these other repercussions.
Bill?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to a couple things. I think when we passed this, we were expecting it to be used for special events, very rarely, basically. And I did find the memo that went with the fee increase. The way those work is they're usually proposed like 30 days or 60 days ahead, and then they have to go on file. And so the memo probably didn't follow it through all the different steps. But in the memo, it said, like Carol said, it wasn't covering expenses. So the recommendation was to replace the $30 event fee and add a fee for $100 for special events without road closure, add a fee for $250 for special events with road closure. And then here's the kicker. The increase will generate an estimated $700 additional revenue per year. So that indicates that we were expecting, what, maybe 1 or 2 road closures and 5 or 10 special events for the whole year to get an extra $700 that year. So it's not something that we were expecting to apply 4 or 5 times a month for one organization. So that should be an indication and maybe help determine give you some direction about what we were expecting. I'd also say that I think Belden made an excellent point about calling police. We want people to feel comfortable calling police. So whatever changes we suggest, we want to make sure that people aren't penalized for calling when they're needed. Maybe the language about city resources could be better defined, that doesn't mean calling police in the emergency when they're needed. I think it was crazy to turn down IMC's generous offer of 9 o'clock at night and the amplified music. That seems like that would cover most things that would cause problems. When I did see the flyer for this event, it was a $5 entry fee, starting at 9 p.m., going to 2 a.m., 18 plus, come party and support, dress to impress. I mean, it looks like a fun event. I saw online video of the event. It looked like they were having fun dancing and everything. But if we're looking for similar events, nothing that I've seen on that sheet highlighted in yellow or green would be similar. I mean, this was a party, and IMC should have had somebody there, and it's unfortunate somebody brought in liquor, but things like that happen. They need to learn how to handle it. But I don't understand. I don't think that the 12-month probation is fair. I don't think that's what was meant for these. I mean, this is a place that really doesn't have any special events planned. Maybe they come up now and then as far as the way we define special events. But it'd be a rare thing, I think. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that this was meant for rare things that could get out of hand, basically, not everyday events that we all go to at the IMC. I mean, the bike project has special bike repair classes that go past 8 o'clock. Those could be considered special events, I suppose. Just a couple other suggestions maybe going forward. If we're going to try to have some kind of probationary period for things, instead of having a cost per event, maybe a couple $100s for the whole 12-month period, and then instead of submitting another application every time, it would just be, this is similar to the one we had last week. this is notification, not a new application, but we're just notifying you that we're going to have another event similar to what we had last week. So make the notification instead of application and have an annual fee to cover the whole probationary period. It's kind of an idea of a standing permit, I guess, for that period, especially for most of those other events that don't really involve resources.
Can I just say one thing just about that framework, which I appreciate the thought you're putting in to try to adapt the tool that we've created, but in having the conversations since last Monday with staff and learning about some of the history, what has happened, what happened in 2017, and then what happened more recently, is it becomes there's an incident, and then the correction of the issue is that the IMC takes a stronger managerial role, and and that's what we should be targeting. We should find a way to when we have a problem, to incentivize that behavior, because the permitting in 2017 is not what solved it. It was that the IMC took a stronger role, and so that's really I'm not sure this is even the right tool. So that's what I was trying to say in terms of we need a more thoughtful conversation about how the long-term changes that should take place. Because I just don't know that the permitting construct as this probationary thing, I'm not sure that is really working and will work. I don't know that it will work in the absence of strong management.
At the time, there are two tracks that led to this ordinance. The first track is a lot of it was embodied in a policy. And it took several years to convince some staff people that this needs to be an ordinance, because the city cannot enforce a policy, which is in a policy and procedural manual, on the citizenry. It can enforce it in terms of employee conduct and how they handle these things. So after a couple of years of pushing, those staff members agreed. Another track that was taken was a concern about, and I suspect maybe an over-concern, but that's not my call, for free speech events. So that's when we incorporated the free speech part of the ordinance, and I believe, Bill, you were a major contributor in terms of your review and comment on that after it came to you the first time. And then finally, this ordinance was reviewed at high levels of staff, department heads, and in some cases division heads. And I have to admit, to me this has been an extremely educational process. We're not here for education, we're here to resolve a problem. But I was never made aware in drafting and taking people's comments, staff comments, to tweak it and tinker with the ordinance. I was never aware that the IMC had the number and diversity of events. I can tell you, when I drafted the ordinance, it was not to deal with the myriad of events reflected on the yellow and the green or whatever the colors are. It was not my intention when I drafted it, even though the city council approved it after more drafting recommended by city council, that it would apply to these types of cultural events, as opposed to, I don't even know how to call them. I don't want to call them music events, because music is a speech event potentially. There's a difference between profit-making events and events that are held, like most of the events, if not 90% of them or more, at the IMC. So this is, from my perspective as a draftsperson, a terrific learning process. And as I see it, I'm going to take direction from the mayor and the city administrator, meeting with you all. If you all have input, whatever we come up with is going to come to you. And so obviously you'll provide us with your input.
Are there any more comments or questions or discussion? Okay, two more, and then we got to kind of move it on. Dennis.
In sort of a different area of city management, we have had maybe almost a doubling of the kinds of varieties of liquor licenses that we have created for the city, which are customized to specific kinds of things, including one-time events of using wine for a nonprofit organization for an event in the community, and also unique brewing for microbrewing facilities in the community and things like that. So we've adopted our liquor license in a lot of different ways to improve the kinds of licensing that we have defined and allowed in our community. And I think that we should use the same kind of discernment here to correct the kinds of events which we want to regulate more strongly, and others which we gladly appreciate and approve of in general in the community.
Bill?
Just a quick one as far as increasing your awareness of the IMC. I don't know if the young man talking about his radio work said what WRFU stands for. It's Radio Free Urbana. So that's another thing you can add to your knowledge about.
Mary Alice?
So I'm still struggling with the near future. So I think what the mayor and Carol are suggesting is that there's a meeting on Wednesday, and let's wait and see what was resolved. That's what it sounds like to me. And I think the thing that troubles me about that is because there still is disagreement, misunderstanding, I'm not sure what phrase you want to use, in terms of what events the city expects the IMC to apply for special permits. And so if I put myself in the IMC shoes, I can understand why they're hypersensitive to this right now. Because we've served them with multiple letters. We have threatened them that we're going to fine them for doing this. So if I were in their shoes, I'd be like, I got to do it all, right? I've got to submit applications all, because we don't want to be shut down completely. And so I guess what I'm saying is we need to be very clear about what types of events, if we do any events in this short term, because it's obvious that we have issues with our ordinance and that it's not fair to hold the public to a standard in which we ourselves do not understand. And so with that said, I do want to bring up, I spoke to a couple of people today, and I said I didn't want to do an autopsy on what had happened in the past, but there is one thing that is bugging me. And that one thing is this original letter that we sent to the IMC about the event on March 15th. So the original event on March 15th included the fact that the City of Urbana Police Department, I'm just reading here, the City of Urbana Police Department was alerted that a possible special event was going to occur at the IMC, and an Urbana police officer went to the IMC to investigate the alert. Now, by Jim's definition, that means that there is sale of alcohol, because based on that item, that there was sale of alcohol. So I'm not sure who alerted the Urbana Police Department, and I don't know if you know who alerted the Urbana Police. Not a person, but what did they say? Do you know what?
I don't know verbatim. So a lot of this, and like you, I don't want to go back and dig up the past, but to understand where we're at, we need to look at some of the past. And in 2017, we had near riotous times when the IMC let out. And we knew who those promoters were, and we knew who was involved in those events, putting them together. And through talking to Champaign and other areas, when X is holding a party, it typically ends in a fight. And so the sergeant that night was notified by another agency that said, hey, X was going to have a party here, it didn't happen, they're headed to the IMC. And so to keep that from becoming a problem and being proactive, the sergeant went to see what was going on, and that's when the alcohol was found.
So, I mean, I can understand if the police department walked in and they saw a whole table with a whole bunch of beer on the table for anybody to come in, they saw a keg somebody could come in and buy. What they saw was somebody walking in with an open bottle of alcohol and then seeing some other, right? I mean, that's what this says.
I would have to review, because there was not a report written, I'd have to review with the sergeant who was in there. But as I understand it, he saw, it wasn't just somebody walking out.
Well, according to this, it says, while the officer was outside the IMC, he observed a number of individuals coming and going from the IMC, suggesting that an event was going to occur, was occurring inside. So that's the event. It's not right now assigned as a special event by our ordinance.
No.
Okay. At least one person was seen entering the IMC with an open bottle of alcoholic liquor. While still outside the IMC, the officer spoke with several individuals and inquired as to who was the event sponsor. No sponsor was identified by name. Having seen alcoholic liquor being carried into the IMC and believing that the event was going to occur or was occurring in the IMC, police officer entered the IMC to speak with the sponsor of the event. And this is where they smelled cannabis. So I misspoke. They did not see any alcohol inside the IMC. They only smelled marijuana in the IMC. They're not selling, okay? So even if this event has been known, the people who put on this event has been known to have some rowdy people at the event, they weren't found to be selling pot. They weren't found to be selling alcohol. I think that it's a big leap for us to then say, okay, you're now in uncompliance with our ordinance, and now we're going to hold you to a 12-month stipulation that you have to comply with our special events purpose. It was small, is what I'm saying. I think it's something that in 2018 was certainly worked out. And perhaps that conversation with the city needed to be restarted with the IMC. But I'm concerned because we don't have a resolution right now. I want the IMC to continue to operate. We're going to be waiting to see what happens on Wednesday, but I'd like an update to council in terms of what is the resolution, and for the immediate, not the long term. I don't expect you to come up with an ordinance right away, but I will propose that we have this on the agenda again to talk about next Monday, because I want this resolved fast.
I concur.
Thank you, Eric. Mayor Marlin.
We're all in agreement on that. I want to thank everyone who has come out tonight, who's emailed and provided input. I want to thank the council. I want to thank staff for the work that was put in here. And again, I appreciate the willingness of everyone to start fresh from tonight. We are going to, and as I mentioned in my comments, it is a two-track. There's dealing with the immediate issues before us and then figuring out the longer-term solution. And we also have to remember this ordinance applies citywide. It is not just applying to the IMC. So whatever we do has to be flexible and adaptable to being used citywide. We're in the process of completely rewriting our liquor ordinance, as you know, and the focus has been on how do we is adapting the ordinance and policy to really meet the way that people entertain today, the way that people have events today, and the way that people want to have events in our city. So this is also going to be a something that we need to take a deep look at, this ordinance, and maybe we start just from scratch. I don't know yet, but this week we've got to figure out the short-term immediate issues. And we absolutely will report back next Monday, if not before.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's this can't go on like this, and we need to fix it. And I deeply apologize for the stress that it has caused everyone. And I wish we could turn the clock back to March, but we can't. So we'll go forward from this way and resolve this. So I just, again, thank you for the opportunity to fix this, and we will.
Okay, I think that brings an end to the discussion regarding Section 1452. Discussion now, moving on to the next agenda item, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, BPAC. Recommendation to expand sidewalk snow removal districts. Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. You should have received in your packet a communication from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission, but it was handed out tonight. It was online, but somehow it didn't make it into the packet. Basically, the BPAC recommends that the current sidewalk snow removal districts be expanded. So I'll just go over a little bit over what we have currently. So currently the ordinance, which was enacted in Urbana in 2011, it defines 3 districts where adjacent property owners need to clear their snow and ice after a snowfall of 2 inches or more, and the Public Works Director has declared it a snowfall event. There's 3 districts: the Downtown District, University District, and Philo Road District. And it requires walks to be cleared within 24 hours once they've declared the event. It has to be cleared 48 inches wide, and if the ice is too hard, it has to be covered with sand or other abrasive materials. We have a FAQ on our FAQ on our website, and then when BPAC was looking at, well, let me go ahead and show the map that they recommended. So currently, the 3 districts, the kind of green spotted areas are the current snow removal districts. So this is the University District, the big one that goes from Florida Avenue up to Springfield and Lincoln to Wright Street. Most of that is already plowed by the university. There's a few areas that are churches and private apartments or fraternities, sororities, things like that. And then the other one downtown basically goes from Illinois Street to Water Street and Vine to Race. And again, a lot of that is already plowed by the city because we have parking lots with adjacent sidewalks. The courthouse, I think, does their own, or maybe the city does it for them. But the city does quite a bit in there, and I have a map that'll show you what we do and what private property owners are doing. But the recommendation is to expand both of those north to University Avenue. Northern part of downtown Urbana's experienced a lot of development around the Boneyard Creek and Broadway Food Hall, all of the 5 Points area, the Gateway Shops, the new Culver's and CU Adventures. All those things are attracting more pedestrian activity. Also, the Crystal Lake Park has just put in a new sidewalk along Park Street that does a good job of connecting the hospitals to the Gateway Shop area and to our downtown. So we're also recommending a little jut up Broadway to connect to that area. There's also some bus stops in there where people tend to stand in the streets waiting for bus in the wintertime because the sidewalks aren't plowed there. And then the other 2 spots we recommended for removal would be all along University and all along Green Street between those 2 areas. And that's mostly because of the heavy investment that the state and the city are making in improving the walkability and bikeability along those corridors, as well as all the development that's happened around Lincoln and University and adding pedestrians to that area. And the northern part of campus too would help the people that are the extra 700 people or so at the retreat and the new development, the gathering. When this was first passed, the campus circle wasn't open, so that's new. There's going to be another Green Street building on University there. So there's a lot more, probably several thousand more users or potential users in that area. So yeah, the investment in IMCOR, making that more walkable, the safety improvements along University Avenue, those we think all lend themselves to making it easier to get around. Just for comparison, you'll notice that our total area, the other area that I didn't mention is the Philo Road district, and that's just along Philo Road, both sides from Florida down to around right around Myers, where the special use path is on the east side, and then the sidewalk kind of peters out on the west side. So that's both sides down to there, and then just the one side down to Windsor. But that's just a linear one. There's not much area to that. But the total area in Urbana is about 0.77 square miles. For comparison, Champaign's mandatory sidewalk clearing area is 2.17 square miles, so we're still less than half, almost a third of what they require. So I included the communication from BPAC in the form of a resolution in case you had any questions about that. I will go back and just briefly show the maps we used to help us figure out what to recommend. I think mostly we tried to avoid requiring a lot of owner-occupied houses. There's only one or two in the new university district we're recommending that are owner-occupied, and there's about a half dozen along Green Street that are owner-occupied. So most of the requirements would be for businesses and for apartment buildings. Apartments are already required if there's 4 or more units to clear walkways that go from a public walk to their on their private property, that go from the public walk to the door, their stairways, all those sorts of things. They're already required to clear all that. So we thought it would be less intrusive and less demanding for them just to also be required to do the public walk in front of their apartment. And a lot of them are probably already doing it. So in a lot of cases, it's just making this mandatory will make those 2 or 3 property owners, or hopefully make those 2 or 3 property owners on a block that aren't doing it, do it, and then you'll have the whole walk clear. Because there's nothing like walking halfway down the block and then having to go out in the street to get around one property or something. So this is a map we put together thanks to data from Public Works showing who already plows the sidewalks in the areas that are currently required. So this is a campus district. The blue is already being plowed by by university. The red marks are the ones that private parties have to plow. So there are some in there. It doesn't go all the way up to University Avenue because it isn't currently in the district, but you can get an idea that at least everything west of Goodwin would probably be covered by university already. They're plowing it. There's a few buildings, a public safety building and WILL, places like that are in there. So it's really these last couple of blocks that are mostly apartment buildings. If they aren't already plowing their sidewalk, they would need to. There are a couple of exceptions in the current ordinance. One is Western Avenue, that's one block here between I think it's Gregory and Lincoln. That's accepted from the ordinance currently. I'm not sure why, but now we have 901 Western. It's a big apartment building there. I think maybe because it was probably some private residents in there before they accepted it. It's also still, it's accepted from Michigan Avenue south to Florida. There's a lot of private owner-occupied houses there that were accepted. BPAC didn't have a problem leaving that exception, but probably the one on Western, it would be good to get rid of that exception. This is the downtown area. They're currently, the city already does the orange ones because those are around city parking lots. And the yellow ones are being, let's see. Yeah, I think the yellow and orange are already being done by the city, and just the red are being done by private organizations. And again, we don't have the data for that's right, Broadway and Race. So those would be added, Vine would be added under the recommendation. And we don't have any data about who's currently plowing those, if anyone, but I know at least on, well, no, they got that one in there. So maybe the city ones are in there. So those would probably be mostly private there. And then this part here would also be in the recommendation. So with that, I think what we're hoping council will do would be to take the next step to ask staff to review what kind of staff resources would be required. I think changing the ordinance is pretty straightforward. Could almost use the language in the communication from the BPAC resolution, and maybe get rid of one of the restrictions. But I think the question, and it wasn't a unanimous vote, Craig Schonkweiler is on BPAC and representing the city, and he voted no on it because he was concerned about the city resources that are required to enforce the ordinance, and pointed out that if someone fails to shovel when they're required to, it's up to the city to have it shoveled and then bill them later. So it does require some staff resources to monitor it. But I think the areas that we've selected would minimize, would hopefully be high compliance areas, because a lot of it is already being plowed, and there's not it's not a heavy weight on owner-occupied units. The main reason I think we were concerned about putting a lot of responsibility on owner-occupied units is because people are gone a lot. Usually a lot of people will shovel themselves, but if they're gone on vacation, they don't necessarily have somebody, on standby to do their shoveling. There's just a lot of resistance, I think, to that. I think we'd all like to see larger areas in the city be mandatory shoveling, or at least be clear whether it's mandatory or not. So that's basically my presentation, if anybody has any questions.
Mary Alice?
So I'm trying to understand, is BPAC suggesting that, let's just take Green Street, because that's the one that's like one specific street and not an entire area. Is BPAC suggesting that anybody who owns property on that will be mandated to clear it if Public Works declares, regardless if it's an apartment building? Yeah, on Green Street.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. That's what we're suggesting. That's the way it is currently in all the green areas there.
Right. I mean, you just said exactly what I'm concerned about, which is owner-occupied houses, especially, in the winter. People go away for break, and trying to hire somebody to just clear your snow is challenging. Okay, it's much harder to get somebody to clear your sidewalks than it is to get somebody to plow your driveway. Plows will come through. It's very hard for people to find that unless you have your own crew. Like the big apartment buildings have their own crews that go out and do it. But if you are a single landlord and you don't have big crews and you got to find somebody to do it, it's very challenging. If it's challenging for a landlord to find it, I'll bet you money that it's really hard for owner-occupied places to find it. And so I would be in support of this if we excluded the owner-occupied units. I know it'll be patchwork. I think we can encourage people. And maybe the way to do that is to say that this falls into the snow removal districts. If you are owner occupied, it is strongly recommended that you do it, but there is no fine if you don't. That might be one way to just include them in there, but then the penalty for not doing it is not the same.
Yeah, like I said, we determined there were 6 residents on Green Street that are owner-occupied in that stretch. Another thing to keep in mind is that MTD recently, within the last couple of years, went to designated stops. So there's only 4 or 5 stops in that stretch along Green Street, where it used to be you could stop on any corner. Now there's designated stops. So to get from one corner to another, you don't have the choice of waiting on the corner. Basically, you have to get to one of the stops. So, it's up to council, but there are some good arguments, I think, to just mandate it.
Dennis?
And maybe I'm wondering about University Avenue, because we're expecting to have improvements both on Green Street and University Avenue, and I don't know, like, in what year we're going to see the new sidewalks on University. Have you had feedback from the businesses that are on University Avenue?
No, this is just a recommendation to council. So if it was to be put on the agenda, I expect we would have to have some kind of notification, whether, I don't know if you'd have to send a notice to everybody. So I don't know. You'd have to ask staff about that.
I think in fairness, you'd have to.
Yeah,
let people know that
maybe.
they're about to become regulated by a new ordinance that has to do with their cleaning. Since so many of the businesses on University are automobile-oriented, driving in and out, it's sort of hard to know unless you're like next to the hospital and you are an employee of the hospital and you're crossing University Avenue to get to parking or something, that what you would need the sidewalks to be plowed with at every time that there was a. So, I mean, I think that there's things to think about that aspect of University Avenue.
As far as timing goes, too, one option would be to, I think University is supposed to start next summer, but one option would be to implement most of it starting this fall, and just have an implementation date for the two corridors be a year later or something, and go ahead and pass it, but just have the implementation date be delayed for a year to give the chance for Green Street and University to be completed.
Mayor Merlin?
Point of information, at the last QATS meeting, the DOT representative said they still hope to do bid letting for University this August. So then there's still work to be done before construction started, but I imagine it will be under construction. And that, my question is related to University. As far as I understand, they plan to put an extra wide, it's like a multi-use path along both sides of University Avenue. I think I remember 8 feet wide, which means it's a bike path, it's pedestrian, and it's really important for that to be cleared and accessible, because the point of this is to provide for pedestrian safety along University, so we're going to have to take that into account.
That's after the two new developments go in, right?
Well, they're kind of going to be simultaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the construction and also the fixing University Avenue, period.
That's what we're
going
talking
on.
about, yeah. So it's going to be a lot of construction the next couple of years in that corridor. But eventually, there will be, very nice pedestrian bike path along the whole length of it, which is going to improve safety tremendously and access. So we want to encourage people to use that to get to the downtown, to get to the businesses, and to be able to access, Broadway and campus and that sort of thing.
Okay, Eric, do you have anything to contribute?
No, I'm just mulling over the question about the private, the residential properties on Green Street, and thinking on the one hand this, but on the other hand that. So I have to probably think more until it comes to us at a more advanced stage. But except that I do.
Go ahead.
Except that I do think that Green Street is going to be increasingly important corridor, once it's redone, an increasingly important corridor between campus and downtown. So it probably is really important for it to be bikeable and walkable as well as drivable.
Eric, go ahead.
Eric makes a very good point. It will be the main, and I've said this a million times, it will be the main connecting corridor between campus and the newly renovated hotel. So we want to make it exceedingly easy for people to stroll down Green Street any day of the year, back and forth to our downtown. So
I guess I'm actually leaning towards including all of Green Street in this, all of that stretch of Green Street.
But one piece of information we do need is actually what the city's experience has been in clearing sidewalks for owners who don't do it, and I haven't had that information yet. See what we're in for, and what our experience with cost recovery from the owners is. We just haven't had that information yet. But I do appreciate BPAC's work on this, and a lot has changed since the first go-around on snow removal was passed, and it is time to for our maps and our practices to reflect the new development that has occurred.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Is there any other business before the board or the committee this evening? Okay, seeing no more business, then I say that we are adjourned.